Yes, firstly, greetings to one and all who's listening, and and thank you, Dougie, for inviting me on your show.
Okay, then I want to bring Patrick into the mix. How do you find the event went Sunday, my brother, as the PA man?
Just remember, the next time we're having an event, Brother Doggie's going to tell you about it. You make sure you be there now.
Well, thanks, Patrick. My name's Supreme. Once again, hours of the morning, and I always promise to come on the show and go home earlier. I always end up staying late. One thing I liked about Jammers is a person who challenges himself and comes out of his comfort zone and goes in front of a crowd and speaks and breaks down words on the spot. It's very interesting because Jammers actually does surprise me. Not saying, he's not capable of it, but he put himself in a position where he's uncomfortable to answer the question. And we saw an earlier Find Your Voice event where he actually had a judge and a jury and he was getting judged and jury. Once again, he stepped up to the plate once again, breaking down etymology, the words, and some of the crowd were actually asking questions and he was answering it.
Okay, thank you for a very evaluation critique by the man Supreme. You don't leave nothing for nobody else for coming for us. Yeah. So Jammers, I know that you was one of the speakers then. I know you full enjoy yourself and come with some bamboozle words and breaking words upside down, turning inside out. Your people bamboozled, and you definitely have a talent to be able to break things down on the spot. So Jammers now, so give us your spin on things, man.
Well, I think Supreme was right. Yeah, I was on the spot, but it wasn't a position I wanted to put myself in. I was on the spot. Yes, thankfully it was a great crowd, and I think I've only spoken. I counted it. I've only spoken 7 times in front of an audience, and this is the second time I've actually used a presentation, and the first time I used the board. So yeah, for me it was
Okay then. As the words, man. Man, you love words, you eat words for breakfast, dinner and lunch, Sister, how you feeling anyway? That's the first thing.
Yeah, I feel quite good. It was a nice experience being here this evening.
Okay then. So, you're all charged. Oh yeah, I forgot to ask you, how do you find the event went Sunday? Gotta ask about that.
I enjoyed that event. It was very knowledgeable. I saw so many powerful and intelligent people together in one room. It was inspiring. The only thing I would say is that next time I wouldn't want to be stuck on a stool outside. I'd like to actually be in the main room, so I could hear everything that was being said. But I did catch quite a lot of the first speech or presentation, and that was very good. And I caught bits and pieces of other people's presentations. So definitely worthwhile.
Okay, as I said, the live link number 07960 239 493. This will be the last call to the sister. So I know that someone wanted to ask a question earlier on. Supreme, did you have a question you wanted to ask?
I was just really going back to the question about mental capacity and housing. You said that you were in mental health, and one of the problems that you find is when people are in a certain state, and it's very interesting because we talked about the power of the brain, and one of the questions I did ask is when you're in a state of depression, you're not in full control. Now when it comes to housing, looking after your children, and that's another thing, I don't know if that's your area where children are about to be taken away because of their mental capacity, but like mental capacity and paying bills and about to lose their property. I just want to know how the law or the solicitors stand with helping people.
That's a very good question. Okay, before she answers that question, let's see if we can get this live link going. Greetings. Greetings. Okay then. We're gonna try something. We're gonna try something different. We're gonna try something different. Supreme, continue the reason, Supreme. Sorry.
Yeah. The question was how
You deal with
mental
capacity.
When it comes to housing, the situation is, if they can't support themselves, i.e. bills and so forth, it's not really a housing issue, it's more of a mental health issue, and that's where a mental health team need to get involved. They normally carry out an assessment of their mental capacity, and they either section them on section 2 for assessment for a period of 2 weeks, or section 3 for assessment and treatment. If, for example, they're on the borderline where they can be in a community because they're not a harm to their self or others, they should have support workers, and those support workers should do various things like support them with the accommodation, i.e. handling their money and affairs, and make sure that their property is in a good enough state. You did mention the fact of if someone has mental health issues and they have children and are finding it difficult to actually look after the children, that also goes into a different subject area, and that is family law. I don't deal with children, i.e. in family law, but I do know what happens is the social services will do an assessment on the welfare of the children, and they may make what's called an interim care order.
Okay, just put a pin there. Greetings. Okay then. I'm sorry to keep you on hold for me. We had some problem connecting with you. Do you have a question, please?
Yeah, the question, I sort of couldn't hear, they were talking about mental health. If a family has special needs a child, can the landlord still put that family out of the home? And what is the procedure when it comes to when you're living in a rented accommodation and you have special needs children, with the laws regarding the household, if, let's say, they fall behind with their rent or something or other? What is the procedures with that?
That's a very
Can
good.
they put the family out?
That's a very good question. Very good question.
Hello, hi, I'm Willata. There is no short answer to that. There's various different ways in which you can answer that question, and there's various different support mechanisms that should be in place. So, for example, if you're in a property and the landlord wants possession of that property, irrespective of the makeup of the household, if the landlord wants that property back and goes through the proper channels, they can obtain possession of the property. However, if you're saying, for example, the reason that they want possession of that property is because there are arrears, then what you need to do is then address the family's income situation and address whether or not they're receiving the correct amount of support for the makeup of the family in the property. For example, if you have disabled children or disabled members, are you receiving the correct welfare benefits? And if you're still falling short of the rent, there are different avenues you can go down with the local authority and maybe request help for rental payments, which is called a discretionary housing benefit top-up payment. You can go down that route.
I want to ask a question. It's quite a burning question as well. While I'm a sister, I just want to ask a question as well, yeah? While you're on the line as well. That if you're in a property and that, for example, there is rats and mice is inside the place there, you know, can you again go to you to get compensation, or how does that work?
That depends on the problem, because there can be vermin in the property due to the structure of the property and it's not being sealed correctly, which is the landlord's responsibility. But then again, it could be because of the lifestyle that the tenants are living. So it depends on which is the cause. It would need to be investigated, and if it is an issue where the landlords are responsible, they need to carry out that work immediately, and it depends also on the level of the infestation.
Okay, so in this case it's not the tenants, the landlord neglect or whatever. You know, there's mice, and you know. So again, they can come to you, and what can you do? You can.
I will have to investigate the matter first. For example, there will be initial consultation where I would ask a number of questions, and having done this quite sometimes, I know the questions in which to ask. So I ask those questions, and then if needs be, I will visit the property, or a surveyor will visit the property and establish what the cause is. If, as I said, it's a cause where it's the landlords are liable, because some landlords, say for example, have loads of items in the back garden, haven't cleared the back garden. There are things that they are responsible for doing that they haven't done. If those are the causes of the vermin, then it needs to be done, and it'd be something I should be able to help with. And as I said, they should be entitled to compensation if the level of the infestation has been harmful to their health.
Yeah. Okay then. Okay, my sister, do you want to come in again?
Yeah, I have another question. So with certain homes, they have you can get mold, and we know that when you get mold, that it can affect the spores or whatever. If it can affect your breathing.
Yeah, it can cause skin irritation.
Whose responsibility is it? Is it for the landlord to deal with the mold, or is it for you, the tenant? Because regardless of what you do, you've got the windows open, you're told you've got to keep the windows open, all the rest of it, winter, fuel costs and everything. Who bears the brunt of all of that?
Okay, this is something I touched on earlier on. It's a very common problem, and what you'll find is it could go either way. If it's a structural defect, for example, if windows have been installed and they haven't been installed properly, and for example damp roofing has not been installed, and there's rising damp which leads to the condensation and mold growth, that is a structural defect, and therefore the landlords are liable for that to rectify it.
How would you know the difference between structural mold and
because what you would do is you need to get a surveyor to inspect, or an environmental health officer would inspect, and they would know what the cause is, because they go around with meters and they read the readings from the wall, humidities, and the humidity in the wall and the dampness in the wall. So they would know whether or not it's occurred because of a structural defect or lifestyle. And when it's lifestyle, there are generally telltale signs that it's lifestyle that has caused it. For example, the drying of clothes inside the property, not ventilating. For example, what is landlord responsibility as well is to make sure that there is adequate space and ventilation. And you will find in a lot of accommodation they will provide you with the vents. However, the vents in the walls are not open, or the actual dehumidifier meters are not working. So that is not structural, but that is also something that falls on the hands of the landlord, because it's their responsibility for adequate space and ventilation.
Okay then.
So with the landlord not meeting the needs of the tenant, would you say that, because you hear people saying, well, they're not doing it, so I'm not going to pay my rent? I was asked that question, exactly that question, not too long ago. My advice would be, it was off air actually. My advice would be, do continue to pay the rent, because if you don't pay the rent, what will happen is that you will end up falling in arrears, and you'll cause further issues, i.e. the landlords will then want to take you to court for possession due to rent arrears, and you may even get to a level where you can't actually afford to pay back the rent. So you've put yourself in a difficult position. Although when you go to court, if it's for possession proceedings, you will be able to counter claim for the disrepair, if for example they haven't carried out the work and you've given them reasonable notice and they were liable for doing it. But it's not actually, in my opinion, a chance you want to take. If they're not doing what you believe they're meant to do, you should seek legal advice first before making a decision not to pay the rent.
Okay then. My sister, I know you want to throw some more questions, because you look like you load up.
Well, I was going to, but I know.
All right, come on, load up still, because I'm just watching the clock, and we have a schedule in front of us still, but come true. This might be your last question still. Cause look at you, and you ask some good questions. All right, come true.
If the landlord, they have carried out works on the property, they haven't put everything back as to the way it was, what can you do? Because if you've had things which have been there, they've done the work, but the workmen haven't put it back as there's a certain word that they use, which means, my understanding is, if it's a cupboard that was there and they've done some work behind the cupboard and they pulled it out, they need to put it back as it was. What's that saying they use in the terminology?
I can't recall, but I do understand what you're saying, and I'm trying to think of the word now because I've used it just a few days ago when writing correspondence. But the position with that is, have you actually, I don't know if you're actually asking this question for yourself, but the first port of call would be to go to the landlord, communicate with them and say, this is the situation, they've come here, they've done this work, however they've not put it back in the state it was in originally. If they resolve it, then obviously that's good. If they don't, then you could get somebody to write a more stronger letter to them, because the position is that they need to put it back, they need to rectify any damage that they've caused.
But tell me something, if you find that a landlord is very difficult and don't want to communicate, he's very ignorant and and so forth, what does one do in that situation?
I normally find that a good strong letter to them gets them corresponding with you quite quickly.
Okay.
So if you undertake doing the work after they've done it and they haven't done it and they've come twice or 3 times, would you be able to present your landlords with the bill if you've rectified that whole area that they didn't do?
If you're talking about private landlords, you'll have to pursue it. But if you're talking about social landlords, it's always best to obtain their permission first. Because I've had instances where they haven't carried out the work correctly and it needed to be done. So the tenant has had to have done it themselves. But they normally obtain permission first. I know it seems weird that you have to obtain permission, but the only reason you obtain permission first is to ensure that you have the money reimbursed. Alternatively, you take photos of each stage, i.e. before the work was done, when it was done, and when you've paid for it to be done, and provide them with the bill and send that to them with a letter.
And one more question. Why is it I've noticed these days that landlords are quick to put tenants out knowing the situation or what the economic situation that's happening with our pay not rising as fast as the climate for what is that word? The climate, our wage not rising as quick as everything else is rising. So the landlords, because I've noticed quite a few people are saying, oh, well, it's only like a month or 2 months and I'm being evicted, or they want to evict me. Can they do that? Do they have the right to do that?
The short answer is yes. The procedure is, if you're in more than 2 months arrears or 8 weeks arrears, then you can be taken to court for possession. You're asking why are they doing it, and you've obviously spoken about the social and pay as it is at the moment, like pay is not covering your rent, but the reason they're doing it is because obviously either they want the property back or they want to let for a higher rate of rent.
Okay, my sister, you open up some cans of worms, you know what I mean, and you're asking the appropriate question, because the question you're asking, people there want to ask the same question as well, and it is a challenge, you know what I mean. And as the sister said, that you really got to look at both fence here, because you have some landlords are scumbags, right, and you have some tenants who are total scumbags as well, you see. So you do have to look at the both fence, you know, because you have some landlord, they don't care, you know what I mean? As far as concerned, they don't business about your situation. Come out them place, you know. There's no humanity, and you have your picnic and the children, and you have some tenants who, you know, abuse the place and abuse the whatever, and they deserve to come out. You see what I'm saying? So, you know, you got to look at each case, but it is a challenge. It is a challenge. So, listen, my sister, we need to feel free to phone in a little bit later on, right? Because we do have Jammers, Siam, Regional Supreme, and Patrick Side the host still. See? So we're going to talk about the event, and we're going to talk about high level of consciousness and spirituality and world affairs. See? All right.
I'll continue listening.
All right then. Nice one. Give thanks. Give thanks. Give thanks. All right. So, my sis, we want to put the pin with you right now because we don't want to burn out all your juices out now, you know what I mean? Because, you know, so you have some power and you start give us some. So give us your number once more again, my sister, please, or contact details or your website or your email address.
Okay, my name's Walata. The firm is Atalor Solicitors. The telephone number is 0203 581 9293.
Say it again one more time, please.
0203 581 9293. I have a Facebook page, Atalor Solicitors. You can Twitter, Atalor Solicitors also, or my email is Walata, WALATA, at Atalor, ATALAW, solicitors.com.
Okay then. So what's going to happen when it says do come again in the next 2 or 3 weeks time, but what we're going to do, we're going to make it a way where if you have a specific case, right, you just phone in and we try to answer that specific case so we have an idea. See? So we're going to make it quite specific, yeah? And so forth, you know. And she don't come in, she won't be coming physically here, but what she can do is also phone in on a regular basis just to keep us informed and keep us in touch. And she, like I said, she'll be working quite closely with the Find a Voice organization. See? And so forth. So my sister,
thank you so much for having me. It's been
thank
a pleasure.
You. Big up your king man. You never big him up yet?
Yes, I hope he's listening. He might have fallen asleep by now, but yes.
Wait, we're not asleep now. You can't sleep on you now, man. What do you mean?
King Miles at home, yes.
Yeah, and your little one, you got you.
My 2 little ones definitely should be sleeping.
They definitely should be sleeping.
Definitely, yes.
How you know they should be sleeping? They should be up listening to you, yeah?
No,
you don't want to listen to you?
Not
okay.
At their age. I can save that for another time.
Another time. Okay then. My sister, again, we want to give thanks to you, yeah?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
But your book, you know, Etymology, the roots of words. So break down what we mean by etymology. What does that mean? And break it down slowly so people can understand.
Yeah, I know. I've been told I talk too fast. I think it's really out of fear, you know, really. But anyway, I'm speaking from my life. But yeah, basically, etymology is the truth. I mean, well, you go into a dictionary, it tells you the history of words. But when you go to look at the Greek or the Latin, what etymology means, it means the truth. You know,
it means the truth.
The true words, yeah.
The true words.
Yeah, true words.
Etymology means the true
word. That's okay, right, yeah. And that's where the confusion is, because if you've created the language, then you should be the history and the origin. So if you've created the language, you shouldn't have a word in your vocabulary that's looking for the origin and the history. So basically, that's where I've gone. I think beyond what other people in the circle have done, where they go to Latin and break down Latin. I've gone beyond the Latin and looked at the roots, which is
so etymology. Where does that come from? Latin?
It comes from Greek.
Come from the Greek.
Yeah.
Okay then.
To describe something that's was there previously. Basically, that's the real. And the book, what I've done in the book is, when I was looking for language, I couldn't find a book where it had everything in one place, because the dictionary and even a lot of grammar books, they wipe out Africa out of the equation, and you don't have the Hebrew. The Hebrew's totally out of the equation on it.
So, hold on. Someone asked a question, I think it might have been today, and based on your presentation and so forth, yeah. And what I was saying tonight, you look at the root of words, right? You don't really necessarily look at the dictionary, because even that you find contradiction in using dictionary. But why is it you don't use the dictionary in terms of reference, from right saying that?
Well, if you look at a dictionary, the dictionary can't even make up its mind what the word is. It gives you about 5 definitions of the one word. So the dictionary is confused. Right. They don't know what the one definition of it is.
Right.
And a dictionary is a meaning. A meaning in mathematics means an average. Yeah. A meaning is not the precise. It's not precise definition. So basically, a meaning is showing you that it's not the precise definition of a word. And in a dictionary, after every word, you've got in brackets the phonetics of the word. So basically, the phonetics of the word doesn't come from Latin, doesn't come from Greek, doesn't come from German, or doesn't come from Spanish, doesn't come from Italy. The phonetics comes from the Carthaginians in Africa. But in the whole of the dictionary, it won't say nothing about Africa. So that's why when you look at a dictionary, you're going to be a dick, unless you look at the phonetics and find out the root of the word. And I've just looked in the Oxford Psychological Dictionary, and basically English is a meta language. A meta language. English is a meta language. A meta language means when you look at the original language and you use your language to refer to the original language. So that's what it is. It's a copy of a language. It's not the original language.
Okay then. So, in terms of how we articulate ourselves or use, when we express to each other, I mean, we have to continuously redefining the words we express to each other.
Definitely. Because I'll get to the point about why I don't do is the dictionary. If you go to, as I say, if you go to the psychological book and you find out, you look at the word meta language, you'll see that English is a language that you're using to refer to the original language. And if you don't tell people that you're using this language to look at another language, and you hide the fact, then you create a paradox. Right, a paradox is also a psychological position. So a paradox means you're creating a lie. So if I'm not telling you that I bought this car from Fred and I'll say it's my car, I'm telling you a lie. So the dictionary is basically a lie. It's not telling you where the original language is coming. It's giving you a meaning. It's not giving you the fact. So basically the dictionary is a lie. There's no such thing as an English alphabet.
No, just an English alphabet. Okay then. So as I said, we do have jumps inside the hole, so look to tear up things upside down when it comes to everything about words and language.
Yeah, and I'm glad Jamin's mentioned that, because that was leading to a question that I was going to ask you about. Where did the alphabet come from, right? And it's always been bantered around in the era. I don't know if I'm correct in saying this, with the Y and the J in the alphabet. And because you put up some words and I was thinking, well, hold on a minute. If there wasn't a Y and a J, how can we pronounce that word in the way we're seeing it, if you get what I mean? So...
as I said, basically, if you're totally correct, because if you ask a Greek man, a Latin man, or English man, or Italian man, or German man, what does A mean? They won't be able to tell you the answer. So if you've created the alphabet, you must know what alpha means. You must know what A means. So basically, that's showing you that this language. That's why it's not an English language. It's not such thing as an English alphabet. It should be an Afrobet. because to be lettered means the letter has a meaning. A letter should have a meaning. And when you go to Hebrew, the Hebrew language, you go to the Phoenician language, you go to the hieroglyphic, you'll see that each letter has a meaning behind it. So if you, for instance, you said the letter A, you turn the letter A the other way around, you see an ox's head. That's where the Phoenician definition of the A come from. The A was meant strength, so they signified the ox as strength. So, and also you get strength by your intake of air, oxygen. So the A, when you look at the Phoenician definition, relates to strength, relates to your intake of air. That's why it's first. And if you go to the Hebrew alphabet, you'll see the same thing. The ox signifies strength. So that's the meaning of the letter. So every letter has a meaning, and the meaning is a way of you reaching your full potential. It's not just a word to say something. It's a way you reach your full potential. Then you go to the hieroglyph, you see a vulture. So the vulture is teaching you about nature. So the letter was a memory tool to teach you how to use perfect action and perfect thought with nature. That's why they was able to make pyramids and live in gold and achieve things that they still can't do now, because the letter was just a device to achieve their higher nature.
I just want to jump in here to come to current day, and there's a word that I see, and I know they're going to put it in the dictionary, but to me, and it's the word Brexit. When they now, instead of saying all the word now, they put Brexit, and I say to people, that's not actually a word, but it is now being used so much that it's a word. You understand?
Jammers continue, but what I will inject and say is that this is example of composite words, because the English language is a composite language. You take words, or you have dialects from different languages, so to speak, yeah, and then you combine them together to create a word, and this is which ain't a real word.
Yeah.
So this is an example. When you're saying Brexit, because it's supposed to be exit from Britain, exit. So this is these composite words are what, if you don't understand how the languages come together, then you can't even really say you know what you're saying. You see, Brother Jammers.
Just bounce off what you said. Basically, it's a process called co-location. So you put two words together, or two sounds together to create a new word, such as internet. So this is proof that they have not created anything. They've got to use sounds that are already there, put the two sounds together to make up a new sound, because they can't create new sounds. They can only use sounds that are already there. So really exit and break away, put together to get Brexit. So that's basically how the English language is made up of sounds called grammar, and the grammar is taken from the Phoenician alphabet, because let me just stress the point that a unit of sound is called phone from the Phoenician. So how the whole world registers sound is by the phonetics and by the Phoenician alphabet. Phoneme in Greek means to speak. So basically, Phoenician was the science of putting sounds to the symbols and the letters. So ancient Africa put the sounds to the symbols and the letters that the European has never mastered and never will master. So they have to use our unit. They have to use our skill. So a skill to put sound together to use to even be able to speak.
I know there's another word, and I could come up with words that I've questioned, and that was back in the days they used this word called yuppie, and I used to think yuppie sound like poppy, so poppy yuppie. But then yuppie was a word for forwardly moving, like a something so. And I used to think, well, what that's got to do with yuppie and whatever. And then they tried to bring in boppy, meaning a black up mobility. I can't go through the whole thing. But is that not slang being put in, that because it's been used, like in the year as a buzzword, now it becomes a normal word, and I can't understand that.
Well, wow. We're talking about the way language is being used to really just manipulate your mind. And the way it messes with the certain areas in your brain. Because if you look at the type of language the youths are saying now, they're saying things like
Wagwan.
Hey, but we say wagwan, yeah?
In line of the dictionary.
That's in the.
Is it?
I was gonna go somewhere else, but you know.
Yeah, go ahead. You go.
But what it was gee, man, you just took me on to something else. But because I was gonna remember. I remember the time we was growing up, and the word wicked.
Yeah.
Yeah, the word wicked. That word turned into something positive. Wicked. Everything, yeah, good. And then I remember when that got put in a dictionary and defined as good. Now, I feel at that time, this is when we were really, we unsuspectingly, we were contributing to the distortion of meaning, okay, with words that had its clarity before, in the sense of what we associated with. Because now wicked is something good. Yeah. Right? And wicked ain't good. Wicked is wicked. See? And because of the effects, wickedness, the results of wickedness is not something that is pleasurable to you. You see? So looking at how these words then can become, as in a language, meaning tongue, how the tongue gets abused and misused, and then that is putting out various tonal frequencies that are not tuning you in to I would say the agreeable side of your nature. Because, for example, the youth stem right now, listen, when we growing up, if somebody say you're sick, you know what that means. You're not feeling well. Now the youth them I said, this thing is sick. Yeah. And the thing means and they're say telling you, oh good, this thing is the best thing. Yeah. Right? So what is happening? We know what is happening, but the awareness and what do you do about that? Because English is a made-up language, okay? It's composite like chemist. You know, certain words that we can say, okay, relate to. Chemist, chemi. Yeah? Alchemy. Right? So when you look into the etymology, which is supposed to mean the true sense and the study of the true sense of words, you find that they will tell you, in some of the words, origin unknown. In some of them, it will be Hindi. In some of them, it will be German. In some of what's making it up, it's going to be Old English. Some of it's Hebrew. Some of it's all of a sudden, certain words, certain origins that them can't define. Yeah? Because obviously they don't want you to find the link between where these words or the origins of these words come from. But the thing is, it's about going to another level with these words, because every word, I mean, if we go back to what Jammers was saying about, the English isn't actually the origin of any language or origin of any kind of writing system, so to speak. But what you would do, you'd find, if you go back to Summa, because we don't really talk about Summa. We may talk about Greek, talk about Old English, Latin. We talk about Hebrew, which is not even, Hebrew is a verb. Hebrew is not even a language. Aramic is the language. Hebrew is is an action based on crossing over. Ibri. It's when you cross over. In fact, in their book, talk about Abraham crossing over from the Euphrates to the Tigris River. And the people who were on the other side, they called him Ibri. Yeah? Which means to cross over. So then now we end up having the word Hebrew, believing it's a language. And it's not a language, it's a verb, it's just an action. The actual language would be Aramic. So, go on.
Yeah, just before you move into the next one, I just want to catch up with you. So basically, I want to just keep up with what you're saying, and basically, to further confuse, I'm just going back to the word wicked, to to further confuse the situation, when you go to the Latin language, you see they've reversed the symbols. Yeah. The root word of Latin means to hide and conceal. So basically, what they've done, when they've took the sounds of the symbols, we create the sound of the symbols, they've taken them away so we can't see them. They performed a process called strip-fo-symbolia on us. That means strip the sound from the symbols. So basically, we're seeing the word, they're giving us a good word, and we're looking at it as a bad word. For instance, the word wicked. The word wick means to see, means a light. So that's bad for them, because if we start to see things from the wick, through the light, it's going to cause a problem for them. So wick is something bad for them. The next one is the word no. No means to be free. When you're trying to run from your parents, they say no, because they put a bad signal on the word no. No, it also means to sell. It was the capital of Egypt. So when you want to be free, they say no. So now the energy they put on no is that it's a bad word, but no actually means to be free. The next one is nega. Nega means to stop. Negative. So basically, if you've got poison in you, you're gonna negate the poison to stop it. So negate means to stop. So basically, they don't want us to stop them progressing. The next trick word is the word live. Livio in Latin means to envy. So basically, they are saying a word that was originally good, taking it to reversing the polarity, so we think it's a bad word to us when it's a good word. So that's basically that's the first point that I like to make, is that they've stripped the sound from the symbol. The second point I like to make is basically what you said on the Hebrew, because I'll concur what you said with Hebrew, because basically if you look at the Hebrew language, it's actually a Kemetic language. Basically, it's based on Akhenaten, because Akhenaten had the theory of the one God. So basically, and he fought against all the other principles in Egypt, and he had to move out of Egypt. So basically, and it was Egyptian priests that moved out of Egypt that created the Hebrew language. So as you're saying, it's something to move. This is what happened. Egyptian priests had to move out because he tried to big up himself and get run out of the country, and they created this Jew language. So the truth is Jew now, and the Jew, so we're going to give it to you now.
Can I mess both of you guys up, linguists and masters of the language? Now, I've been to Africa, I've been to France, I've been to Germany, I've hung around with some of the best people here in Tottenham, or Nam, as in Vietnam, and I don't actually understand what they're saying, because 90% of communication is actually unsaid. It's body language. And so far, I haven't got myself into trouble yet. It doesn't mean to say I'll go out there and get it wrong. And so 90% of communication is non-verbal. So when I was in Germany, and I was saying, I want this piece of cake, there's a thing about, you could say to somebody, I hate you, and you could say it this way, I hate you. Or you can say, I hate you. And the tempo and the level has a meaning. And when someone's communicating with me, whether it's the new Polish people, whether it's the new our friends from Somali, who now, or even our friends from the Caribbean, with a bad attitude, you've got to listen to them. And even though you don't understand, because it's a broken patois, actually many different parts of the Caribbean, each has their different broken patois, and it's when you listen to it after a while you get to know it, but first off you don't. So you have to read more or less the body language, how it's said, what is emphasized in it, and take it from there. And I think this is where we get into a lot of problems when the youth encounter the police, when some of us encounter establishment. We are not reading, or we're not communicating using body language, and what we say and how they take it, they're not actually listening to us, they're just watching our body language, and it may be very energetic and they misinterpret it.
Can I just jump in here? I'm just looking up a word called hyperbole. Hyperbole. I don't know if you know what that means. I'm going to just read the definition because it kind of answers what Chairman said. And anyway, hyperbole is an ancient Greek, yeah? It's used of exaggeration. You know, you said the word wicked. So I'm just going to finish reading it. As a rhetorical device or a figure of speech. In rhetoric, it is also sometimes known as osist. In poetry and oratory, my English is bad. It emphasizes and evokes strong feelings and creates strong impressions as a figure of speech. It's usually not meant to be taken literally. So when you say the word wicked, you understand? So the usage, I'm going to put it, the usage may be used to instance of such exaggeration, emphasis or effect. I might jump there. As in the sense someone say, I had a bag and it weighed a ton. Because it doesn't make sense. You carrying a bag, but I'm just jumping there. But that's a thing they call in language I don't know if I pronounced that right.
Hyperbole.
Yeah,
it is.
Hyperbole. So what you saying as a word what is used to exaggerate a certain kind of...
In other words, I'm pointing it back to Xiaomi in the sense that, you know, when you said the youths will say a word, wicked. It's sick, but it's an exaggeration to intensify something, but it doesn't mean that you take it literally. So it's like, you understand?
Yeah. I mean, this is this also breeds confusion, though, right? And you know, this is why we, you know, from the word hyperbole you were just saying, this is why we talk about hype, and don't believe the hype, as Public Enemy has said. Don't believe the hype, because the hype is not what you're supposed to acknowledge or line up with as true or any factualness. So these are intended to confuse, okay? And what Patrick was just saying is very interesting, because it's about taking this language to another level, or taking the whole communication to another level. Because as he rightly said, 90% of communications is nonverbal. And when we think about language, you know, it means tongue. That's all the word means. If we're going to take it literally, the word language means tongue. It does not describe the dialect you're using. And what is dialect? Dialect is divided speech. Lect, to lecture, you see? And you're dealing with a divided speech, I should say. So all of this, if you remember now, in the book, that's all I'm going to call it. In the book, there's a passage where it explains about everybody on the planet speaking of one accord. An accord would mean harmony, and that this intimidated these beings who translated to say Yahweh or Elohim or God, was intimidated by what the people were able to do because they were in one accord. They spoke one tongue, and therefore there was nothing that they could put their mind to that they wouldn't be able to accomplish. So this whole thing about building a tower, the ziggurat, up to what they're saying to the heavens, which is like, well, how are you going to build a tower that high? But what it actually is, it was like a space launch station where they were gonna launch a Shem, which is a space shuttle, right? So these beings said, well, y'all, man, we're gonna have to go down there and confound their tongues, right? So according to the book, this God came down and confounded the tongues of the people, right? Which is why they scattered them abroad. This is according to the book. So confounding the tongues, scattering the people abroad, is then what they're indicating is that the origin of the confusion in the world is based upon what they call God in the book, that has created this confusion, so people will not be able to understand or comprehend what each one is saying, to have the same images, meanings, to be able to resonate with one another, in order for us to be able to do things as in unity, in a harmonic way. And then we have this issue about why can't we come together? Why can't we why can't we work together and all of that? And then many people believe in the book, and if they really knew about the book proper, they would know why we ain't be able to work together, because according to the book, their God is the one that has confound everybody's tongues and is the source behind the confusion that everybody find themselves in, according to the book. You with me? So I will go in deeper into this, to where we're gonna go, but Jammers, you want to?
I just want to bounce off of what you said. The key word is harm. I want you to remember harmony. Remember harmony.
Harm.
Basically, what we used to do that the other races didn't do, we used to hear with our heart. Look at the word heart. The first 4 letters of the word heart is here. The whole of the word is heart. The middle of the word heart is ear. Take the H from the heart, put it at the end, you see the word earth. The first 3 letters of the word earth is ear. So basically, we communicated with nature. We could tell, just as Patrick said, a vibration, like a snake or a cat, the 2 most intelligent animals that work with vibrations, work off a sound. So when you made a vibration or a sound, I could feel that sound, because I hear with my heart. They are travelers. They see things because they travel by the sea. So they see things and they have to analyze it. When you hear with your heart, that's the most powerful mechanism. It bypasses your brain, because when you taste something, it has to be analyzed by your brain. When you smell something, it has to be analyzed by your brain. When you hear something, you have to compare the other sounds that you heard in a certain way. So it has to be analyzed by brain. When you see something, you have to analyze it with other things that you see. But when you hear with your heart, the vibration goes straight through your ear. What you hear in the word here is the word ear, into your eardrum, the beat. You've got organs in your body that plays the synthesize the sounds that goes into the heart, that beats the same vibration of the vibration that you heard, so you can synthesize with the vibration. So we heard with the heart. So to counteract that, remember what they call us Phoenicians, masters of sound. How do you counter a master of sound? That's where the word foe comes from. So we were the Phoenicians. So they saw the people with sound as their foe. Foe means sound, foe means enemy. How do you counter? How do you bring down a set of beings that communicate vibration? You distort the sound like hyperbole. You distort the sound. Their god of war that they use, their god of war was Mars. No, Ares. Ares was the god of war that was the most hated god in the whole of Olympics. Ares' son was fear and terror. Ares' daughter was who? Harmony. Harmony is what they use to bring us down. Harmony, what did harmony do? Harmony united 2 opposite points. So basically, we were the traders. So we harmed their money. So basically, harmony is what they use to put a sound in there that makes us think we are like them, but they've distorted it, so every time we use the sound, it brings us down.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's many ways to kind of come at this this topic, this subject, this awareness, and the way. You see, when we're now dealing with vibrations, this is where we have to be at now, to transcend these sounds, because what you're saying there now with the heart and everything you've said there, you see, these are kind of like what we're doing here is decoding and unveiling what's been hidden in plain sight. Yeah, because, as they say, the truth is hidden in plain sight. When you've distorted people's a way of identifying with what would align them to become back in resonance with themselves and the higher and the source of our being, frequencies have been used to distort matters very much, right? So when you're now dealing with the heart, okay, and when you mentioned about the ear, your heart is the first organ developing in the fetus. The brain hasn't even developed yet, and the heart is developed in 21 days, something like that, right? Now, this is where we should be realizing where the truth is at. Because when we were growing up, there was a thing such as learning by heart. Did you remember them saying, yeah? You would learn by heart. You don't learn by head, you learn by heart. Yeah? So by learning by heart, what it meant was that when you know something by heart, you don't even think about it. It just comes through. When you just need to recall it, it's there. You don't have to think, you see? Now, what happened is that the way the system is in how it conditions us out of the natural resonance we're to tune into is by taking you out of your heart and into your head. Yeah? And then they fill your head with stuff in, like, what them call it? What, Christmas, turkey, and what them call it, Thanksgiving, and thing. Yeah. So you become stuffed. You're stuffed, and when your head is stuffed, what they said, my head feels kind of cloudy. Yeah. So you can't process information properly. Yeah. And then they give you the emphasis that your mind is what your head is what you're supposed to use. Now, the truth of the matter is that, in California, because, it gets confirmed when they have scientific equipment that can so-called tangibly verify what they would deny unless they have some tangible evidence, because it's all based on the five senses. And the sense beyond the five senses, what is that? We got the smell, we got the hearing, we got the taste, we got the sight, we got the touch. So the language entraps you within the five senses, right? But what's the sense that goes beyond the five senses? I'm going to continue, but I'm just asking a question.
You want me to answer?
Yeah, what's that?
I can give you two more.
Just one.
I'll give you two.
All right, then you can't do that. But the one links you into the other.
Okay, because these two are maybe a diversion, so I'll give you these two that you can go. So, but the first one is innocence. Okay. What we had when we was young and we was pure. That sense.
Clear. Pure is clear.
The new sense that they've replaced that with is license. Because you need a license to do anything in this country.
Well, when you said license, that word's come from what's it? Licentious, which means actually something to do with and sexually just rampant. You know what I mean? You can just grind up anything, right? That's where the word license is linked to. Yeah. Now, the feeling. I'm just giving it away. But basically, the sense after the fifth. Beyond those five senses is feel. Now, this is where we need to connect. This is where we really need to tune into.
Well, Supreme and
I was just going to go back to how Jammers started the conversation talking about meta language, and then I thought of the word metaphor, right? And it's something that you're all saying, and I looked it up. What metaphor is? A figure of speech. Yeah. So when you go.
But what
I need to come in that. If you look at the word metaphor, yeah, Yeah, it's got the word "fo" in it. So it'll tell you a figure, but it won't tell you about the sound. So even in the word metaphor, it's hiding the reality of what it really is. You have to even be careful of the dictionary. That's why you have to be careful of the dictionary's definition of it.
It's funny because it says it may provide clarity or identify hidden similarities between two ideas, a metaphor. I don't know if that's explained anything.
Well, you see, when you say this now, we go on the next level, because this is now about the equivocal nature of the language, right? When we're talking about a word can have different equal meaning to something else, yeah? So you don't have this one clear definition to this word for you to be clear upon it. So when we go into the meta is also where you got metaphysics, yeah? So meta now is opposed to now translate as beyond. Meta is now beyond. This is what the word means. So metaphysics is beyond the physical.
Okay. And beyond the physical reminds me of the Rasta conscious brother on Sunday who says everything is conscious. He gave an example. If you cut off your hand, the hand still remains with a lot of information until it's reconnected back to you physically, surgically, and then it still continues to function. So each section of us has information that communicates on a different level rather than just language. You talk about the heart and how and the senses, and you mentioned feeling as an extra sense. I would say consciousness, deeper still, each cell is connected.
Well, what I would add to this, because this is where we go. Feeling is what enables you to experience consciousness. Because consciousness awareness now is where the reason why the sense of feel is, and when we then deal with the emotional body, which is the energy body really, yeah? This is, without feel, you can't experience consciousness. So feeling is how you tune in to a vibrational frequency, where the feeling, the nature of the feeling is what enables you to know whether you're in alignment with who you are or if you're out of alignment with who you are, or with someone else's vibration or state of consciousness, because consciousness is to be experienced, and the only way you can experience consciousness is through feel. You don't think, because thinking isn't the way you will experience in order to know. So this is where the feel now comes in, to where we then have to go beyond these languages.
Okay, before you move on, we still have to define what is consciousness, because you just said it is a feeling, but again we still have to find consciousness, because people out there listening right now, and we're going somewhere with it. So let's break it down. What is consciousness? Because from instance, there's three different kind of consciousness. You have the subconscious, you have the superconscious, and the unconscious, right?
But they're not separate.
They're not separate. All right, then.
You're dealing with consciousness.
All right.
You're dealing with different levels of consciousness. It's like you have frequency bands, or you look at now. You got these. You got how many? I mean, when we was growing up, there's only 3 channels, right? Now there are hundreds of channels. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So if we use the metaphor of, but not the metaphor, we use the analogy of these channels to help to describe what consciousness is, yeah? So consciousness is the infinite range of frequencies, yeah? Vibrations that you can tune in to different frequencies of consciousness, like tune into different channels on your TV, or different wave bands of frequencies on a radio transmitter receiver. Yeah? Now, consciousness is also energy. All is consciousness, and all is energy. So therefore, all energy is conscious. Now, consciousness is the ocean of boundless creative energy. Right. Yeah? Right. So consciousness is the generator that gives life, gives form and consciousness to that which it is bringing into being.
Okay, so what we're saying is that every form we see, so for example, like a stone, that is conscious, because it's forming to some kind of being, yeah?
Everything is consciousness, but there's a difference between an inanimate object and an animated object. A stone is unconscious. Yeah. Now this is where people are going to give it. No, but everything is conscious. Yeah, everything is conscious. Well, the stone is conscious, and the chair is conscious, and when people don't have or take the time to care enough to have a deeper comprehension of what we want to get into, what you are to know about yourself, then we then start to create miscomprehensions, misunderstanding, or misfit information. And then we start to try to apply that.
I'm glad you clarified that. That's very important. Yeah.
Because the thing with consciousness is, and the difference between a stone and ourself, or the difference between a tree and ourself. Yes, all is conscious. Yeah. And you can tap into the consciousness frequencies of a plant, of a tree, because you can tune into those wavelengths. Yeah. But here's where things get funny. A stone is unconscious, even though it's consciousness, yes, but it's unconscious, meaning that it's not conscious of itself being consciousness, for it to have the awareness to therefore transform itself and become animated and be directing its own, by its own volition. Yeah. So to be consciously aware, to be conscious that you are.
I like when you say that. It's unconscious.
You know what I'm saying? Because look, a tree, you have things in nature that are hardwired into nature, and therefore they work automatically by the universal laws of nature. Yeah. So they just comply on automatic. That because they're working unconsciously. You see what I mean? Because if a tree was conscious of its own self, to say, I'm conscious that I'm a tree, I'm a very fruitful tree, and therefore, if that was the case, that tree would uproot itself and become something other than a tree. It can only be what it is. But it's all the growth, everything in nature is operating automatically, right? Unconsciously, like how people are operating unconscious, meaning you're not consciously aware of various stimuli, various impulses, there you go. Now, when you become aware of what you were unconscious of, you then now start to have an effect on that which you're conscious of, because it's the conscious awareness that is the healing principle within ourselves. What you're not conscious of, you cannot change. Yeah. And it will control you unconsciously. You see what I mean? You begin to be manipulated by various patterns and tricks.
Just give an example. I know Patrick was good. Just give an example so people can follow what you're saying.
Well, Patrick was going to say high blood pressure, but what came to my mind is what came to me was this. It's when we then, my train of thought. What I was thinking is this: the example of being unconscious. You see, this ego we talk about. Now, the ego is developed. The ego is part of. The ego is what enables us to move towards what we want to make, that will make us feel happy, and move away from that which we feel will give us danger and harm, right? Everything's got this ego, but the ego is a creative tool that needs to be directed by the soul. Now, when we're growing as a baby, the ego cried. If a child didn't cry, it most probably starved to death, because it is the way it's communicating its ego what it needs, okay, to make it happy. So this is where the ego now is what makes us kind of without the ego drive, there's no creation, right? There's no protection or defense.
Right.
Yeah. But the thing with the ego that it is that it's limited to only focus on self-satisfaction and survival. But the ego is the guardian of the individuality. Now, it's the conscious mind and the subconscious mind that works together, to develop your personality, your ego personality. Now, You have certain emotions, emotional thoughts that is generated through repeated behavior, certain reactions when you don't have a healthy reaction to life, okay? Now what happens is that these repeated behaviors formulate certain habits, okay? Certain unhealthy habits to how we approach life. Now, as we grow, these habits and thought patterns become stored in the unconscious, right? And until something happens in your life that brings back to mind or brings to memory something that happened way in the past or in your childhood, then these habits you developed, these coming from the emotional thinking of the egoic mind, these habits rise up, okay? And then now, because of the memory, you then start to act out this egoic behavior, yeah? Now, that was always with you, but you were unconscious of it. And one of the purposes of relationships is to bring to your conscious awareness that those habits, those I would say disagreeable traits, yeah, that is operating in you unconsciously because you're not consciously aware of it. So therefore, when you're not consciously aware of certain negative thought habits or states, it's controlling you unconsciously.
Okay, right? Just come in about what you said there. Basically, but beyond consciousness, there's an element that's holding it together, which is element. So element is the intelligence that makes you consciousness. If you look at the word L, it means spirit. So like you've got cement, what holds bricks together, you've got element, that a spiritual aspect that holds things together. The heart, back to the heart, is called AB. The reason why we can connect with a higher level, because when you put Ab with L, you got Abel. So when you're able to do something, the reason why you can sense the vibration is because you have the element of that vibration in you. You can sense the metal because you have metal in you. You can sense the water, you have water in you. So the connection we have with our outer self is through the element that gives us the conscious connection. And the next thing is about it is that this element that gives us is the intelligent level that we have. So to counter, as you said, back to what you said, we can feel things into existence, but they want us to do things the right way and leave the left. Left means to leave behind. Hidden in the word left is the word felt. So this is what is happening to us, why we have a lack of consciousness, because we start doing things the right ways. When you're doing things without being conscious, you're told the action to perform and you perform the action. So this is what is disconnecting us with our conscious level, able to feel things. Just quickly to put it in a metaphor, you've got Cain and Abel. Abel is the spirit you have in your heart to do something. Cain, ka, means to carry something in you. In prefix is a negative. So Cain is carrying something in it that is negative. That's why it is against the person who is Abel. And when you put Cain and Abel together, you get cannibal, which means against. So that's the metaphysics of the word heart. You're relating it to the Bible and taking it to the intelligence of the word element.
Yeah, I'm just going to interject in. I don't know if I'm taking it off track, but in the news last week, yeah, there was a gentleman who
taking it off track.
Yeah.
You don't know if you are, but
yeah. As a metaphor, off track. Yeah, there was a gentleman who, I don't know if he banged his head. He had an incident, and I've heard this happen before. He woke up and he started speaking Hebrew. So the point I'm trying to make is that when you say unconscious, do we inside of us have this unconsciously, but it needs something to bring it to our conscious? Because why would he just all of a sudden can speak Hebrew?
You see,
when was it on the news or the?
Yeah, it was in the papers.
It was in the paper. Okay.
But that's not the first. I've heard of this happening before, where a woman wakes up or something's happened, some incident, and she starts speaking Chinese.
Speaks a different. All right, let me still on track there. Actually, let me use that mic. 1, 2. Okay. Now, okay, still on track, and maybe off track.
a baby, and I'm going to chuck this at you, linguist specialists here. A baby of any country in the world, you could pick up and understand, or is it that any mother can understand any baby, but the baby does not speak any language?
Exactly. Yeah, you see, when women, especially women, have to develop, this is when we talk about intuition, which is a part of the feeling intelligence, because feeling is intelligent. And when we're talking about consciousness, you don't have consciousness without awareness, and conscious awareness is intelligence. So we need to kind of not split these things up like they're separate things. You don't have awareness without consciousness, and consciousness is intelligence. Yeah? Now, feeling is intelligence, a higher level of intelligence than the thinking, processing of the mind. So what you rightly, good point you make, yeah? Because the women, they have to develop this deeper sense of awareness to be able to understand the needs of a baby, or needs that where you can't even communicate with a so-called comprehensive language. So how will you go and look at people who use sign language? They don't speak, right? So you can comprehend them through knowing what the different signs symbolize as words to formulate letters to formulate words to formulate sentences. You deal with the blind, and now when you're dealing with the blind, what do they have to depend upon? They have to depend upon not just touch, but feel. They have to go into that sixth sense they talk about, right? That feel. So there is a deeper language, which is vibrational language. And this vibrational language is transmitted to us from star constellations, okay? This vibrational language is transmitted to us from animals, plants, trees, yeah, the elements, as you say, and ment is mentos. So the L, and L linking back to where they would say it's an Aramaic word they would call Hebrew. L is where you get also the word L means the, E-L, or L can also mean source, yeah. Hence, there's a link with the word El and Al. Elo is singular.
Can I just...
Elohim is plural.
Can I just add to that about communication?
Yeah.
How does a jockey train his horse to be the fastest horse in the world without speaking a word to this horse?
Because it's dealing with vibratory language, because you know that animals actually feel into your energy field, your bioenergetic field. And you're communicating, we are communicating with each other or with people before you even physically meet them, right? And this is why that inner sense, that feel, we need to expound on it and tune back into the inner higher senses that are not dependent upon the external five senses, which is based, that keeps you on this physical identification. So you know the answer to that question, right? Because we're dealing with vibrations, and vibrations is also a language. When you deal with sound frequencies, look how through somatics, a sound frequency can be vibrating through a plate with some substance upon this metal plate. So this sound frequency is being transmitted through the speaker, where this metal plate's on top of it, and there's this substance upon the metal plate. Now it's a sound frequency, and that sound frequency of a particular hertz actually starts to generate and starts to arrange those molecules or filaments or whatever the substance it is, because it could be oil, it could be sand, it could be iron filaments, yeah. And this frequency is actually arranging those iron filaments or sand into symmetrical patterns that is very intricately designed, yeah. No hand is doing this, and it's doing it far quicker than how one would have to put such programs into a computer to generate the same type of image. So this is a sign of showing you that we're just chatting about the sound, for example. which is generated via vibrations, and vibrations is consciousness, right? So through the sound frequency generating through that plate, what are we seeing? We're seeing intelligence at work.
Can I just
because the intelligence of the frequency, it's showing you that the sound is intelligent, because how come it's arranging these filaments, these substance on the plate into symmetrical geographic patterns, man, and shapes, you know what I'm saying, which is orderly and intelligently designed. It's showing you that it's intelligence.
Yeah, can I just say bounce off this? Basically, as I said, what it is, you've got consciousness and you've got intelligence. Intelligence is in everything. It's an element. So everything has an element in it. Everything has intelligence in it. The more aware you are of the elements, the more conscious you'll be getting. But basically, there's the bound and the boundless. So basically, you're going by a set of rules. So you're in that. Unless you break the rules, you won't get to see the intelligence. Like as you're saying, the man with the Hebrew, something must have happened to him when he banged his head to create an energy in his head to access the energy of the Hebrew. Even me, when I was in the van, so the confined space I was, I've went to my wits end, my limit of what I could think of to access. Now I can break down words and spin words the other way around, backwards and front, because I've broken the rules of the language, what you're supposed to be doing. So once you break the rules, once you go beyond what is set, and if you look at the ancient principles of Kemet, you've got set and you've got Hiru. So set is the rules. So once you go past the rules, then you can see beyond the rules, the metaphor, you can see beyond the rules. So basically they've set the rules, and in the truth you're going to find the answer, because in the word truth is the word Ru. The truth of the matter is, the reason why they've hidden the language is because they don't like the fact that you've first. So the reason why when they call something true, it's because they rule what you know. Once you can see that somebody is doing something because they dislike you, then you can see the metaphor. You can see beyond what they are. You can see beyond that person. So basically, you can see his ruin of you. You can see Hiru. You can see his dislike. When you can see his dislike, you can see over him. When you can see over the person that dislikes you, the over will come and you will overcome him by seeing what is being set for you. So basically, you've got to break what is set, and that is the divine science of the hieroglyphics Set and Haru. That's the same thing in Cain and Abel. So basically, somebody dislikes you, so they're setting for you. Once you can see the dislike, you can see what is over them or beyond them, and then the over will come and you will overcome them.
Oh, get it. What I want to do is have a very short break, and then we'll continue the reasoning.
Consciousness is everything. And there's another way of explaining this, that we are formless awareness of being. For example, you could be in a dark room and you cannot see anything, hear anything. You cannot smell anything. You cannot taste anything or touch anything. But you have an awareness that you exist. Right? So that awareness of you existing is your awareness of being, which transcends a lot of the concepts we identify with and get limited towards. We get identify with these structures and these concepts. But we are formless awareness of being. This is what we is. We transcend all concepts that we actually have of ourselves, because the true nature of ourselves transcends what we're being aware of being now as man or some physical body. Now, consciousness being the creative power. Consciousness is light, and that light is the light of what? Life. And that life is the energy that consciousness is. And through that energy is how we create. Now, what we are aware of being is what we become. This is what in the book, that statement, as a man thinketh in his heart, so shall he become.
So is it.
Now, we were talking about the heart earlier, and we'll go deeper into this about the heart. Because the heart is actually the gateway towards your subconscious. Because your subconscious does not think, your subconscious feels. And the way the subconscious is impressed upon, or how the subconscious gets programmed, is whatever you feel to be true, not what you think to be true. What you feel to be true is how the subconscious then responds and says, okay. And then it accepts that impression, like a seed impressed upon the earth. It goes in, penetrates into the soil. So the soil of the soil, check it out, the soil and soul, yeah? You got the soil of the earth, which represents our consciousness, yeah? And the seed represents what we and where we focus our consciousness on. For example, we are like a torch, and wherever you focus a torch, that's where the light will be. Yeah, that's where the light will be focused.
Well, on time, we've got someone on the live link here.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay then. Greetings.
Greetings.
Yeah, greetings.
Greetings.
Okay then. Can the people know your name or?
Sharon.
Oh, okay. We have Sister Sharon online. So Sharon, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I didn't want to stop. I think his name is Siam's Rhythm. I apologise for that. I just wanted to say a few things just before I retire for the night. I just wanted to first of all thank the sister Walata for the information that she gave out, because a lot of listeners don't even give out the information that she did give out freely.
Okay.
So I really appreciate that, and she's going to be useful for a lot of people, so I just wanted to thank her for that.
Thank you.
And the other thing I wanted to say congratulations to you and to thank you for such a good event on Sunday. I really enjoyed it, networking with other people as well as the speakers that you had there. I know Daryl, Jammers, Ross McCoy and Marvin, and I also was networking with other people that were there at your event. So I just really wanted before I retire, was to congratulate you and to thank the speakers that were there, and to hope that you put more events like that on, and just to say congratulations. And I found it really useful and really helpful, and it's going to continue to help me on, because I made connections with a couple of people there. So I just want to say thank you, Brother Dudley, and I hope you do more, and I'll be attending more of your events.
Okay then. Is that the first time you come, yeah?
It's the first time I've been to your event.
Okay, fantastic.
And I really enjoyed it. It had a very good vibe, very positive energy in the room. I don't want to go on and on, but as I said, really good speakers, and I enjoyed it. So I'm looking forward for the next one. And I was just going to retire, and I didn't. And I do apologise. I think his name, he said, is it Siam? I didn't want to stop his rhythm, but I just wanted to say thank you for putting on that event, and hopefully you'll do a lot more, and I can get a lot more networking out of it.
Okay then. Okay. Well, my sister, give thanks for you to phone in these hours there. As the first thing, we would appreciate you, and and again, we're definitely gonna have more events. And and it's, again, we have to give thanks to you, my sister. So anyway, we know you're going to rest up now, but we're going to keep going and going and going.
The brothers enjoy your rest of the conversation. But as I said, I have to retire now.
Yeah, well,
I just wanted to say thank you, especially to the solicitor, because she gave out a lot of good information, and to yourself.
Yeah. Okay then, my sister. Again, give thanks. Yeah.
Okay, blessing.
Blessing, love. Okay then. Fantastic. Okay then, sister. Just want to big us up for the event what took place Sunday. And if anybody's up and you was at the event, if you want to make a contribution, well, we'll come out a bit more of you this time that I was there. But yeah, feel free to come in on us and obviously ask questions. We have Simon inside the house, and we're talking about consciousness, you think about energy, you think about the soul. You know, it too is one. It is one. But Sam, I just want to jump in and spin up a little bit here, right? Because as you know that, you know, a many conversations we had, in fact we had over the on the ear when you phone in, we talk about, we hold on to a certain kind of concept and hate and this and that and whatever, you know. And you were saying that we need to let go of these kind of concepts and these kind of belief and so forth. You know, if I misrepresent information, Sam, please correct me. You know, but I want to jump in because I think that's very important for you to bring this reasoning and expound upon that. You know what I mean? And again, we do have Patrick and James inside the whole still. See, yeah, man. So
yes,
expound upon that one there, Ross.
Yes, it needs expounding because you know, this term vibrations, good vibes, bad vibes, you know, these are very, very important because we are energy beings. Consciousness is energy, as I said. All is consciousness, and consciousness is energy. All is energy. And therefore, all energy is conscious. Now, if we just look at if we get out of this if we get into the non-physical reality of ourselves, it will be easier to comprehend. Because you know, we have to upgrade even the software of our minds. I mean, even our phones, right, is upgrading its software every month. Yeah? And then you got people still focusing on information that's all 30, 50 years old, redundant. Even the children who are learning, who are doing their SATs at the moment, or had been doing their SATs some months back, and going through all this pressure and this stress that puts them in vibration. They puts them in certain states of, look, a child being stressed, man, can, you know, losing sleep, can't think right, can't nyam proper because them stress out, right? And they're stressed out to memorize various things that the so-called institute tells them that if they do, you know, they need to memorize these things so they can pass their exams, so they can enter into whatever university of their choice, and all of this and all of that and all of this and all of the amount of money that is being spent in order to put your children through college and all of this stuff. The point I'm getting to here is that 10 years from now, all of that stuff they went through, all the information, all of that so-called knowledge that they were memorizing in order to kind of get it correct on the exam paper, well, in 10 years' time, it's going to be redundant. Do you realize how crazy that is, of what we're putting so much energy into? And then in 10 years, what you've been taught is going to be redundant. A lot of us, we was growing up in schools, and everything we was being taught, you can't use that now, 40, 50, 60, whatever years ago. That knowledge is redundant. It's redundant. So what's the knowledge we really need to be tuning into here? The knowledge we need to tune into here, which is what we really need to be dealing with, is ourselves, the consciousness and the true nature of who we are. That we are vibratory energy beings of light, sound, and that we emit energy. Here's a way of putting this. The three foundations of the immutable laws of creation is, one is that all is consciousness. Some people say all is mental. Okay, let's just deal with that. All is consciousness. What does that mean? It means that the mental state, what you conjure in your mind as an idea, your thought is an image. Then when we think about how did the creation come into being? Well, it's an outgrowth of consciousness. Life comes from the inside out, not from the outside in. So when we talk about in the image and likeness, we were created in the image and likeness of the creative source. It means that the image is the idea, is the image of thought, the picture, yeah? And when we talk about creating, what you're creating within your awareness, what you focus your light of consciousness on, is what then starts to, you're giving energy to then bring into actualization.
Okay, so an example would be?
For example, we create, it starts with our desires. And your desires are coming from your soul, okay? Well, because there's okay. In some schools of thought, what it is this. We're the vessel. The vessel is also the soul. The desire is also the vessel. So soul, vessel, and desire is one. So you have to have a desire, meaning what you're calling on, what you're asking for. Yeah? And then that desire gives birth to a thought. That thought really is an image. That image then generates an emotion, or then what you line up to is the feeling of that image. And then after that comes action, right? Now a lot of us think that the action is something physical. Actions ain't always physical. A thought and a feeling is a creative action. Yeah? So the example I'm giving here now is that if you hold a thought in your mind, which is an image, an idea of you desiring a blue car. Let's just simplify this, okay? You were thinking of a blue car. Before you were thinking of a blue car, you never even saw blue cars. Yeah? Now you start thinking of a blue car.
You see all blue cars.
You also going to notice blue cars.
Blue cars, yeah.
So what have you just done? You just lined up yourself with a frequency that is now making you aware of blue cars. Blue cars existed. It's not that they didn't exist before you saw them. But what you've done is tune yourself into a frequency, because everything is vibration, okay? We have to think this way. We have to realize everything is vibration, energy, and frequencies. Yeah? So when you then begin to tune into that frequency of a blue car by thinking about it, and then aligning that up with the feeling, because a thought generates a feeling. That feeling now is you're now feeling the frequency. Yeah? You're feeling a vibrational frequency of a state of consciousness that you are now lining yourself up with. So then the action is the actualization, or maybe the inspiration or the impulse. You may be coerced to move in a certain direction, to pick up the phone and call someone, or just to walk into a particular store. You see, it can happen in any way, that action. But so when you focus your thoughts, thought is an image. Like I used to see someone who used to drive a certain Jeep, yeah? And prior to me seeing them, dating them, I never used to see those type of cars. I never used to see those Jeeps. The moment I started dating them, afterwards, I'm seeing all these Jeeps, the same car this woman was driving. Yeah?
There is some teachers who would tell you, they call it visualization.
Yeah.
They say that athletes can visualize themselves winning the race. You can visualize yourself being the winner, having that house, having that car. And once you visualize it, then you would go for exactly what you're saying. Then you can actually actualize it, make it a physical reality.
So all of that is a process taking place within consciousness, taking place within you. Yeah? So when you think, when you have a thought, yeah? When you change your thought, you change your state of consciousness. When you change your thought, you're actually like turning the tuner on your radio, right? Towards a different frequency. That different frequency represents a different state of consciousness. You have high levels of consciousness vibrations, and you have low levels of consciousness vibrations. Now, as Patrick rightly said, visualization. The thought is an image. Now, some people can't visualize. They would think, I can't see what it is that I want. You see what I mean? Or they can't see themselves doing that, exactly what it is that they desire to be doing. But the thing is you don't even have to see it, you see, because the feeling is the major anchor and the major operative power here. Because your feeling is what's letting you know what frequency you're on. Now, your emotions, the feeling is so important here because we have an emotional guidance system, and some of us may have heard that term being used in different, by different speakers talking on these spiritual principles. But it's very important because the feel is the first thing that we experience, as saying that a fetus, in a developing fetus, the heart is the first organ grown. The brain is nowhere in sight. So we're talking about feel, yeah?
Hold on, brother. Let's take this call here. Greetings.
Greetings.
Yes, dear. Oh, the man.
Yes, man.
All right.
Good night and greetings to all your guests.
All right, dear.
Yes. And I'd like to say, what a brilliant, successful event on Sunday. And like the sister said, we had this discussion a couple of weeks ago about the past event and, most recent events. And what the outcomes have been, and that's a perfect example what the sister talked about. So congratulations on the event, and we like to encourage people to come out more to the future events of Find Your Voice, and it's very fulfilling and positive, because I've met several people even on the day who had a real positive feedback about what they actually got from the event, when it's related to their financial, situation, how to improve it, whether it's their conscious level, absolutely, it was good, most definitely. But I know I know some of your guests are in a flow at the moment. I've got a question to ask some of your guests. And I know they're talking, down to Sam and Patrick and maybe with Janice, but specifically to Sam and Patrick. You're talking about consciousness and about feeling. I just wanted to ask you for the listeners, and I think it's very important, and we like to do things practical. Have you guys, the actual things you're talking about, how have you used them? What has your experience have been, when you talk about visualization and being successful? Could you share us, the listener, your experience of using the techniques and being successful with it?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here, my brother.
That's a great question. That's a great question because actually the experiential realm is really what we need to be into. Because there's a lot of this, intellectual levels of like we approach spirituality almost like an academic course. And it's the experience that's going to make you know what you know. Yeah? And this is where the feel to experience consciousness, different levels of consciousness, different levels of states of your own being, even feeling other people's vibrations to know what they're emitting from themselves. Yeah? Now, where I'm going with this is dealing with the experience. Basically, one time I was selling posters, okay? And it was about, trying to recondition or uncondition the subconscious mind with all the negative images that we had, right? So I was selling some of these positive poses, beautiful images and so forth. And when I was standing, I'm working outside, yeah? So when you're standing in a place outside, there's a lot of non-physical conscious thought forms that are moving around in the atmosphere. And if you're not careful, you can become susceptible to these thoughts, these ideas. You start to feel a certain way, you start thinking along certain lines.